Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right. McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.
Hello guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones. This is a very special episode for me this week because it's my 50th episode. I'm stoked that I got to 50 because, unlike some podcasts that record fortnightly or even monthly, I do this weekly, and I never thought I'd get to 50. I never thought I'd have the listener base that I do, and I'm really, really thankful for all my friends and family that have inputted and been behind me, and all my listeners that are listening around the world, wherever you are, wherever you're doing. I'm really thankful. I really am. Even if you only listen for 10 minutes an episode and then come back, whatever, I don't mind. Thanks very much. It really, really warms the heart. So I really had to scratch my chin about what I was going to do for my 50th episode. And this one is, I thought I'm going to be self-indulgent here. I had looked at all the albums that were released in 72, which is 50 years ago, to see what was out and about then in the heavy rock and rock and roll charts. The obvious one was Black Sabbath's Volume 4. I'm not doing Black Sabbath's Volume 4, as you can tell by the title. I'm going to do Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. And the reason I'm doing Thick as a Brick is that it's my podcast, firstly. Secondly, it's Jethro Tull are a band that are sort of like Sabbath, but even more so than Sabbath, are deep in my DNA. And this particular album is a fantastic piece of musical history that is probably forgotten by some, disliked by a lot, adored and loved by millions. It was first released on the 7th of January 1972, so a little bit, I wanted it to be this week. I looked for something this week, but no, March 1972, sorry, but I couldn't really find anything, as I said, apart from Black Sabbath, and even that was sort of July, so it wasn't the same date. It's one continuous piece of music, so those out there, I'll just give you a little potted history of Jethro Tull. So Jethro Tull, if you've never heard of them before, firstly, excuse me, what do you mean you haven't? Sorry, I used a terrible Star Wars quote there. Anyway, they were formed in 68. They're still going now, by flautist Ian Anderson, Martin Barre. He wasn't in the band originally, but this is just the lineup that was for this album. But they've had a lot of changes in their band, okay? But you have Martin Barre on guitar, who I've seen live about 3 years ago up in the Blue Mountains here near Sydney in Australia, and was one of the highlights of my musical life. It was unbelievable. I got to meet him. Unfortunately, my good friend Parksy, if you listen to this, Parksy, I was about to shake his hand, and Parksy butts in and makes a joke, as Parksy's wont. He loves that. Now, I laughed, John laughed, Martin just looked a bit bemused, and I didn't get the handshake. I got the autograph. He dripped his sweat on my CD, which I've got his DNA, but I didn't get his handshake. And there's a photograph I saw later on with John shaking his hand, and I was like, yeah. I quietly shake my fist at you, Parksy. I can't hate you because I love you to bits, but it was funny. He said, "Can I can I cut in here? It was funny. It had to be there. Anyway, John Evan on piano. We've got John Hammond on bass. Barry Barlow on drums. And again, they said that lineup changes frequently. They went from playing standard blues club blues, because that's what it was in the 60s in the UK, everyone following on from Cream and Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds and all that sort of stuff, Blues Breakers. They were doing that because it was not easy to do. I mean I've played the blues. It's not easy, but at the same time you're sort of constrained within a very tight musical form with blues, and so if you know your blues, your blues scale, your blues fifths and stuff, you're pretty okay. You can sort of get away with it, adding one note into the scale and so on. Your blues extensions. That's not belittling anyone that plays blues, because it's one of my favourite musical forms, but that's what they did back then. And then they sort of merged from that out of the late 60s into the early 70s, and this is where this album comes in, Thick as a Brick. So they'd made Aqualung the year or two before, which is considered one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time, and I would say absolutely undoubtedly. Because can you imagine hearing that album in 1971? It would have just crushed you. It was unrelenting. It was I don't know what I can't really describe it. The title track alone, it just if you've never heard anything like it, it's like a heavy folk, because and then they were sort of they did this album, which they say was their. They said he comes out. Ian Anderson is being Anderson. Ian Anderson he says that it was their stab at taking the mickey out of the pomposity of progressive rock music, but a lot of people have said that Aqualung was a progressive rock album, or a concept album. Is what he said. He was their stab at concept, not progressive, but concept. Not all progressive rock albums are concept albums. Remember, and I sort of stand by him on that. I don't think that Aqualung is a concept album. To me, a concept album is one musical idea grouped together into one outlying story or musical concept. Was Aqualung is quite stilted and staccato in its musical patterns. I don't think it's that. Using the same musical refrain through 45 minutes of an album is not a concept. Lyrically, if you write a story, tell a story across the 8 tracks of an album, that's a concept. Music to me. If that's the case, then if you could say that all musical pieces that held together were concept, all classical music in its conception is conceptual music, you would think. It isn't the case. Anyway, I'm running off the point. So it was 2 tracks, track 1 and track 2. So Thick as a Brick Part 1, flip it over, Thick as a Brick Part 2. It bears a lot of resemblance with I love concept albums, and there are 5. I can name my top 5 right now, but in my top 5 is Marillion's Misplaced Childhood. Now, Fish, the lead singer and lyricist of the band, said that he wrote the album and he said it has 2 sides, sides 1 and side 2, exactly the same as Thick as a Brick, and they have other parallels. Ian Anderson didn't have a lyric. So when they arrived at Morgan Studios in Willesden, which was literally 10 minutes down the road by car from my house where I grew up, a great studio. They used a Neve desk, Paul McCartney, Black Sabbath, UFO, Alice Cooper, The Cure, Yes, Pink Floyd, They all recorded there because of the desk, I believe. It was one of the most modern desks in Europe at the time. And so he didn't have a lyric. So he would come in early in the morning and he would write the lyric and then they would put the music to it, which is an unusual way of recording. Adding music to lyrics can be a treacherous way of recording. If anyone out there who've recorded will understand, because the written word and lyrical form is not always musical. Whereas if you have music before, you can write words that move with the music and form around the shapes of the music and delve and burrow like into the music, wrap around it, and then use it as a tool to use an expression, Whereas writing the music to the lyrics, this is why I think this album has moments that are, even though it's in the pantheon of some of the greatest albums ever made, it is disjointed musically in some parts. I think this is probably why most of it. It took 2 weeks to record, and 2 to 3 weeks to overdub. Most of the lyrics were written by Ian Anderson, but also by the then new keyboard player John Evan. He wrote a fair bit of the lyric on it as well. We'll talk about the music in the second part. Let's just talk about the production of it. Okay. In fact, we might talk about the cover. We'll talk about the cover in the second part because that's really interesting. So musically, it's quite an interesting piece because it has this sort of sorry, my computer's decided to close itself. 1 second. Tap, 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 tap. Nope. Can't remember the password to get to my bloody PC. There you go. It's as it's quite disjointed. If you listen to and you're a fan of Toll and you listen to other Toll albums, so Aqualung, and then into the folk era trilogy with Songs from the Wood, things like that. You can hear the genesis of that. Another progressive band that they seem to think they were taking the mickey out of. They can sort of hear the music in those. So there's flourishes of the keyboard, very heavy keyboard, very heavy Hammond organ. There's a Leslie in there as well. There's also, the drums. There's lots of very folk club drums, almost tom-tom rolling drum, especially in part 2. The Ian's flutes, very obvious in there. There's really a real Christmas. If you know the song, another Christmas song, it has that. There's almost a flute from that. The guitar. I mean, Martin Barre is a genius, and so his guitar parts in there are. I don't think there's another guitarist on the planet that plays, maybe Stephen Hackett, possibly from Genesis, that plays quite like him. So when they said it was a stab at the pomposity of progressive rock, he says that they were aiming at people like ELP or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes, he doesn't mention Genesis, but he probably is, because at that time they hadn't. A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway hadn't been released, I don't think, so he couldn't aim at that. He was aiming at the Genesis album, like the Yes albums, Close to the Edge, and ELP albums like Brain Salad Surgery, with their sort of a stab of classical music. But I don't know if he was. I mean, if you listen to the music separately and think about it, I don't think he does, because it doesn't quite reach the heights of absurdity that ELP would reach musically, and it doesn't reach the kind of spirituality and almost religiosity of Yes. It doesn't quite get there. So Yes, as he says, it's an absurdist view of it. But if you're going to be an absurdist view of it, wouldn't you musically be more absurd than the bands you're pointing the finger at? I also feel it was a bit, I don't know, a bit rude, but it was a bit self-indulgent that you could make it. You had 5 albums into a career that wasn't that old. Let's be honest, 5 albums is not an old career to be aiming fingers. I really don't. I think he wrote the album deep down. I think they wrote the album when they did, and then to push its historic side of it, to twist its historiography. I think he added on the I think it's to take the piss out of progressive rock music, because there are people that do put Tull in the progressive canon. I don't go there. I think they're a completely like Motorhead is not punk and metal; it's its own genre. I think the same with Tull. They're not a musical. You can't pigeonhole them. They're sort of one. They're not one thing or the other. You know, I think they are. Tull is Tull, and that's who they are. You know, there's some. There's a sort of 2 or 3 minutes into track 2, or you think it was Rick Part 2, is a brilliant piece of drumming that's almost sits in with the Palmer, the Bruford, and almost, in fact, actually Ginger Baker-esque sort of skiffle jazz freeform. So, I mean, yeah, that side, you could go, yeah, that sounds progressive, that's taking the piss. I think the story and the concept is definitely progressive, it's definitely conceptual, and that could be. But you see, I say this, if he went into the studio with no lyric, did he go into the studio with no concept? Because if he went into the studio with no lyric and no concept, how could it be a piss take on a concept album? Because he wrote some of it before, but most of it in the 2 weeks in the studio. So I just think that that's a bit of a white herring. A bit of a white herring? Is that the right word? I think it's a red herring. A bit of a... Yeah. I think it's just Ian creating, as he does, his own mythology. Love you, Ian. Absolutely love you to bits. You're just creating your own mythology there, I think. But it's 50 years ago. Hey. When they released it, do you think that the prog crowd got the joke? No, because they probably didn't even know it was a joke had it really been one. And I mean, we talked about the artwork in the second half, but you know, that alone is probably the only side I think that adds to the sort of. Because another thing Ian says that the lyrics and the concept were very Python-esque. They were big Python fans. Yes, I think that could be. That could add to the mythos that it's a point the finger at the pomposity and the virtuosity of prog. But it was very early on in the prog era. I mean, you've got to think that prog is sort of 69 to 73, sort of right smack in the middle. Is it really enough to say that it's a piss take? I really don't know. Anyway, what's some more notes here? It charted very well. It charted number 1 in Australia, number 1 in the US, and number 5 in the UK. With the very crowded charts, then you had Sabbath's Volume 4. You had a number 1 album from T-Rex, White Swan. You had a lot. I mean, also some terrible. I mean, number 1 album that week that it was released was a Dagenham Pipers, which is like an all girls tartan. I mean, you got to remember mid-70s. People go on about we talk about we look back at the past and how wonderful music was, but only if you know what you're looking for. Most of the time, it was very bland. Your Sammy Davis Juniors, your Carol Carpenters, your no disrespect, great musicians, but really bland. You know, I think that same week in the top 5 there was what did I see? When I was trying to do my research, I didn't write it down, so my brain's got to remember. But it was that boring. It was like the Two Ronnies had a top 5 album. You know, I mean, it really does. It does say to you that the people that were buying the records then, because music was bought by the adults and not by the kids, that did change mid to late 70s. That changed. Because the 60s music was bought by the kids. Singles were invented. But then it moved towards the adults again, because those kids were growing up and they were buying sophisticated music or safe music because they had children of themselves and they were yearning back to their past, and they, you know, looking at what their parents were listening to, and terrible stuff that would just, you know, when you flick through the secondhand record bins of op shops and thrift stores, and it's, you know, it's like the top of the pops best of albums with half naked women in bikinis holding glasses of Pimm's, you know, and with stark yellow backgrounds, that kind of awful stuff, you know, the stuff that came and went so quickly that you didn't even know it was there. So, you know, where was I? I went off a complete tangent then. Music was, you had to know it. So when it gets to number 1, that's a big thing. It's a big thing. And in Australia, Jethro Tull are massive. I mean, at one time, Tull were the biggest band in the world. The biggest band in the world. 6 nights at Madison Square Garden sold out. Broadcast globally. Globally. I remember my mum and dad watching them. My in-laws went to see them here in Canberra when he had broke his leg. Ian had broke his leg at a tour, and it was during the A tour, and he came on in a wheelchair and just sat there and played his flute, and sang. And we all know Ian Anderson's. I mean, we know the look, you know, the codpiece, the wild eyes, the wild hair, the standing on one leg, the jester. But you know, so to get to number 1, particularly in the US, that's a massive call, right? Massive, because they were of all the music places in the world to sell music. In America in the 70s was the safest place, you know, so safe. You know, if it wasn't the Beatles, it was West Coast sounding music. You know, again, Carol Carpenters and the Sammy Davis Juniors and the the Beach Boys, the really safe music. Although Pet Sounds is not a safe album, but you know, I transgress on that one. Anyway, this album was still 6 years away from what I considered their best album, which is Heavy Horses. I love their folk era, and Heavy Horses is my favourite album of theirs. I do have all of their albums on vinyl, and I do actually have 3 versions of Thick as a Brick. I have a reissue, the one I'm going to talk about today, and I've got quite a rare Kiwi print, which I really like as well. But musically, yes, it's not. If you don't like folk music, if you don't like the pomposity and the craziness of progressive rock, it's probably not your cup of tea. If you don't like one stream of consciousness lyrically, because it was originally designed as a poem. It's basically a poem by Gerald Bostock, who's the main character. I was going to get to that. We'll get to that on part 2, but I get lost sometimes with it. Sometimes I listen, like the opening track is just brilliant. Like it's wonderful, and it's often played live. You often find that particular part. It's like a track, the opening 5 minutes is segmented and used on a lot of their their tribute albums and best ofs. I do get a little bit lost in it musically, and I do get a little bit not bored, I think that's the wrong word, but it can get a little bit samey, and that's because I said before, right back in the episode, that he's recorded it on the day. They've not spent months and thinking about it, working at it, the nuances of it. Recorded in 2 weeks, which is blink of an eye with a lot of albums, when you think that not 13 years later, when less than 13 years later, when Def Leppard were recording Hysteria, that was almost a 2-year record process, over 5 or 6 different studios. So back then they did record quickly, because it was about product out, recording, touring, product, recording, touring, because people's attention spans were so short because there was so much on the market, and people, and they didn't tour so massively as they did, and they didn't sell it through streaming, which would live forever. Once it was in the charts, it was gone. It was in the back of the shelves in the record store, and it was being remaindered and sold off for a couple of quid or £1, and you knew you had an old issue because it had a hole in the corner punched in it, and that usually meant that it was being discontinued, and you could, and so that you didn't have the time, you couldn't hang around, you had to get the album out, tour, album out, tour, single, album out, tour. And it's why that Maiden, when they did Power Slave, was so buggered at the end of the tour, because they had to push that album out to every 4 corners of the world, and they had to keep selling products. Why they're the biggest band in the world then and the biggest band in the world now, because they just push their product out to every aspect of the world. And Toll were doing the same thing then, and that's why there's a phenomenal period of music, sort of early 70s to mid 80s, where bands put out album year after year after year. You could guarantee, like Regular's Clockwork, hey, another Toll album is coming. Hey, another Maiden album is coming. Hey, another Boston album is coming. Hey, another McCartney album is coming. And you could even if you didn't like the one you just heard, you knew that next one could be better. Which isn't always the case, but often the case is not. So anyway, I'm going to warm my tea up. I've chatted away enough. You listen to some adverts. I will unleash my copy of Thick as a Brick, and we'll go through the fantastic artwork and some of the things, funny insights on the record cover, which I'll put a picture up, or you'll have to see a picture up anyway, on my Facebook page and on the all social medias. Anyway, talk to you soon, guys. Bye.
Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right. McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has a special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.
Welcome back to side 2, guys, or part 2. So this episode is Thick as a Brick. Again, it's our 50th episode, and this is celebrating 50 years since the release of Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick, released in March 1972. Not quite June, as I said before, but hey, it's very difficult to find a decent album that I could talk about, and this is it's a very significant album in the respect that it takes toll from, I think, that the heaviness of Aqualung into it sort of coming, pushing and bordering onto the folk aspect side of the band, and into their sort of progressive era, which really, when I think about it, actually garnered them big money. I mean, Ian might say that it was a joke and a parody, but really, he made a lot of money off the back of this album, and he garnered a large new audience. Whether they knew they were taking the mickey or not, it doesn't matter. Anyway, let me just some tea. And back. So now, bear with me. This might get a bit of noise, guys, because I've got the vinyl on my lap. But it's like a big newspaper. Okay, so it's sick. Now I took some measurements. 1 second. This is quite an interesting fact, actually. So it's built round the size of a small English newspaper of the same period, and it's when it folds out. What did I do here? I wrote it down. It's 330 millimeters by 410 millimeters, or 12 inches by 16 inches, which is the same as a regional newspaper of the same period. It's the St. Cleeve Chronicle, number 2072. It cost 3 pence for the newspaper, and the published date is the Friday the 7th of January 1972. It's a wonderful packaging. Again, this is the thing that I think we do well now, because bands are trying to get back to the halcyon days of records, and so you get some great packaging. I mean, the heads for the Dead album that I got recently, that I pre-ordered like a year and a half ago, the quality it's sumptuous, it's beautiful, but it's not anything different. It's oh god, it's lovely. But it's not quirky or unusual. Like, okay, so if you can get a chance to look at it online, I'll send some pictures. But it's basically, you fold the paper out from the record, and it's a full-size newspaper on nice thick paper card, printed. So in the top corner in red, it's got Jethro Tull features on page 7, and page 7 is all the lyrics from the album. It's the St. Cleeve Chronicle and Lindwell Advertiser. So those are not from the UK. In the UK, you get local newspapers. I used to get the Hendon and Finchley Times, and you get Chronicles, and you get this. We get them in Australia. Used to get the one in Canberra where we are, but we don't get it because we've moved, and the suburb we're in, we don't get the Tuggeranong, the Chronicle anymore. Anyway. Splashed across the front, it says, thick as a brick, judge disqualified Little Milton in last minute rumpus. So Little Milton is the nickname of Gerald Bostock. And it says, the Society for Literary Advancement and Gestation, SLAG, announced their decision, prize winner Gerald Little Milton Bostock, following the hundreds of protests and threats received after the reading of his epic poem, Thick as a Brick, on BBC television last Monday night. So it's basically an outcry about the poem, and so they get disqualified. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I think you should. There are websites where you can see the record, all the writing on it. It is something that you should do while listening to the album. Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff, like we've got this one here. Mongrel dog soils actor's foot. The cameras were rolling. Film actor Robert E. Levy was addressing his men in the making of the new film Biggles and the Snake Woman, when a mongrel dog soiled his foot. The dog belonged to Japanese makeup artist Tatu Tuyu, who recently became resident in St. Cleeve. He explained later that poor little Popsy was taken short. Pictures turn to page 8. And then you turn to page 8. There's me making noise. Lovely. So you tune in for this, then you tune in for the sound effects every time. And there's the picture of Pupsy at the bottom. Oh, just fantastic. Each page has something like, there's an advert for the cinema showing at St. Cleeve Risoldo, son of the non-rabbit, plus Do Not See Me Rabbit. Great double feature program, Lust of Small Nun. The breathtaking bank clerk and the wise man. You can tell and you can hear the Python, or you can read the Python absurdity in it. You just can. I could pick through it Sandcastle man calls it a day. Derek Piff, 39, of Small Close Street, Cleves, plans to give up his favourite hobby next month when he marries Angela de Groot, 17, of Linton House, Port de Grange. Mr. Piff is, of course, the famous sandcastle man who has won many competitions over years on beaches all over Britain. He plans his one final work before giving up the gay bachelor life. On the next exceptional low tide at Bosworth Cove, he will attempt again to scale his model of to a scale model of Buckingham Palace. Oh dear. He is particularly fond of the beach there since the sand is stiff, firm and pleasant to the touch. Angela will of course be there to give him a hand, and he will be taking the Piff children by the earlier marriage to observe his outstanding feat. I just love it. It's got big headline, stiff. Non-rabbit missing, things like that. Beef shortage. Local death by spray incident. Building damaged by fire. Flute concert at rabbit rooms. You know, I'm not quite sure what their thing about rabbits are, but it's there, isn't it? Just lots, and a lot of this stuff in it are mentioned when you mention and you read them. They're all sort of in jokes with the bands. I've actually read this cover to cover many times. I'd highly recommend you to do it yourself. Flying high with Aunt Molly's recipes. Sweet tooth thief fined. A former convent school girl who stole 4 dozen eggs and sweets from a supermarket storeroom was fined £40 by St Cleeve magistrates. Bridget Mullen, 24, of Long Furlough, Limwell Heath, admitted to the theft along with 14-year-old boys who are also from Bosworth Estate. The 2 boys, who were both described as coming from very poor home conditions, were both remitted to juvenile court for sentencing. Miss Mullen stole the goods whilst on bail awaiting trial at quarter sessions for indecent exposure. So she stole sweets and she showed herself off. Oh dear. Anyway, I could go on. It's a beautiful product. So 8, there's Don't See Me Rabbit. Again, rabbits everywhere in this. Russell. Lost and found. Very pretty full-sized emperor penguin found. Sorry. Oh dear. What I've got here. Mother to be or not to be, we will tell you while you wait. Clinical Facilities, St Cleeves. And somebody says, Peter, I've changed. It's all water under the bridge now. Please call me Paul of Lindwall. The personals are my favourite. Oh dear. Entertainments. Baffling magic. Rabbits, doves, penguins, Max Quad, Magic Square telephone. Oh God, that's so fantastic. Oh dear. Red tempera converted, 4-sided black, so you can use a fold away in full stereo, but unfortunately is not portable. I don't know what that means, but anyway, I'm sure someone out there would know what that means. Oh dear. Do not see me rabbit again. There's rabbits everywhere. Okay. But yeah, and then you turn to page 7, and 7 has all the lyrics. Okay. Figures a Bit by Gerald Bostock, Little Milton Bostock. So it's basically the poem. It starts off with my words but a whisper, your deafness a shout. Everyone knows that opening line to this album, and it's just brilliant. Someone on my copy here, I've got 3 copies, I said 4 copies. Someone has drawn in the dots, which pisses me off. Should leave that alone. Why did you need to? There's a dot to dot children's corner, and someone's drawn in it, which irritates me. Okay, what have we got here? There's a crossword that makes no sense. 1 sees 1 down. You've got 5, a damp version of 29 down. You go to 29 down and it says see 28. Number 4, the end, 3 letters. It's end, isn't it? Brilliant. Canine lovers see one across, and you go one across, and it says see one down. Cat. Anyway, it is a beautiful product. If you can get a copy, they reissued it. You can get it in a gatefold. So was that scintillating podcasting? Me sort of perusing a paper, some of it not funny, some of it funny. If you haven't turned off already, please carry on listening. So you can get like a modern version of it, gatefold, with a book in the middle, which is probably a bit easier to actually own and to read. The earlier editions, like the one I've got here, tend to be a little bit awkward. I'm going to get the record out. My copy is on this particular copy. I said, the one I pulled out from my cover. This is my latest option I picked up. Picked it up for like $20. It isn't a lot of money, really. It's on the Prize Records. There is a really rare Spanish one where it actually has track breakdowns and one or two pieces of music missing. And getting those copies, they're around about sort of to own them $300-400 US. Oh dear, sorry. Bang bang, ruffle. There you go. There you go. Boom, bang, wallop, crash. Yeah. So it's a beautiful product. It is a product of its time. It's something that that you wouldn't get now, and if you do, that the actual level of attention across the entire newspaper that you get with the record is second to none. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of scanned across it. I probably haven't picked out the most fun parts, and some of it was a bit. What are you talking about, Tony? That's not hilarious. I honestly. The have me back, please, Peter, is hilarious. Every time I read something, I just picture the Pythons and the Goons looking over Ian Anderson's shoulder, or them just finished watching an episode of Python and then sitting down to write, because it is very Python-esque and it is absurdist, and to be honest, most of the most over-bloated and overproduced prog is very Python, but that's why I love it. You know, I'm one of those people, along with a lot of my good friends of my generation and older than me. My brother's massive Python fan, so if it can tap into that zeitgeist, then I take it. You know, I know another German word, Schadenfreude. There you go, 2 German words, which probably is very apt with this album as well. But it is, as I said, it's about the disqualification of the poem "Thick as a Brick," read by Gerald Bodstock on the BBC, and it's a local boy. There's a great picture of Gerald Bodstock being handed over a cheque that he probably has to give back because he didn't really win it. Thank you for listening. I have rambled on. Thank you again for listening. 50 episodes in. I was going to try and do like a top 50 best albums of all time, but I think that would have had to be over 3 or 4 episodes, and I've got too much planned to get round that one. Maybe for the 100th episode, so that won't be far away, really, guys. Please do come to my Facebook page, Heavy Metal Tones. I'll put the link below. Have a look at the pictures I've got of Thick as a Brick. I'll put some photographs up. Do go and grab yourself a copy. If you can get a physical copy, brilliant. Or just get some pictures of it and listen to the album and read all the tiny minutiae of the album. I swear there's stuff on there even after, and I've had a copy of this in one form or another for 40 years. So you know, I got it. I first listened to it when I was 8 or 9. And I was just mesmerised by my brother's copy, and it would just I would sit there and just stare at the words. As I've told you before, I got into Toll because my older brother Andrew had Songs from the Wood and Life's a Long Song, and I just was like, this is just it just it thrilled me and enthralled me and took me somewhere. Sorry, my phone. Somewhere that other music didn't do. It was not terrifying like early punk was when I was a young boy. It wasn't fanciful and throwaway like the pop music that was around then. And it sounds pompous of me, but I never felt right. I never felt that I always thought it was a bit below me. And I mean, that's going to sound really, I mean, people rolling their eyes and clucking at me and turning off in droves, but I knew that it wasn't music like the pop music at the time. I mean, I love the pop music. I love it. I do. I love it dearly. But it took me a little while to understand that. Whereas I was instantly connected to things like Toll and ELP and Yes and Genesis and the Pistols and the Sabbath and the Damned and Boston, and I roll it off. Deep Purple and Rainbow and stuff that was you usually were older. The Who, I mean, and they were the greatest pop band of all. Oh no, sorry, XTC are the greatest pop band of all, bar the Beatles, but they're a different stratosphere. Won't put them in there. They're somewhere else. They're in a ivory tower. But for the likes of me and you, XTC and the Who, there's a high rhyme there. Anyway, I'm rabbling on. Do come to my Facebook page. Do interact with me. I'd love to hear from you. What album means a lot? What album do you think I should 50 years ago is where, if you know which album or any product that is in your life that's as important as an album as thick as a brick is to me, and just listen to it and don't be prejudiced by it can be a bit impenetrable, but do give 46 minutes of your life over to it, and you will find something in there that you will find beautiful, and you'll find stuff in there which is confronting, and you will find stuff in there which is dense and hard to swallow, but you will get through it and you will find it rewarding. I really promise you will. And if you love that, then really delve back into the Toll catalogue, and you're going to be very, very rewarded. Very, very rewarded. If you like stuff that sounds a bit like 80s Dire Straits, then Rock Island and Crest of a Knave, which I adore. I bought those when they both came out. That's why they're very important to me in that particular time. I bought them in 86, 87 when they both released, or 1990, I think. No, 86, 87. That's the way. Anyway, me rambling on. Thank you for listening to me all these weeks. It has been a privilege. It saved me so much. I was treading water artistically. I was losing interest musically. I was in one of those dips that people have, and this has really brought me back out, kept me sane, kept me motivated, opened me up to so much new stuff, and just talking about it has really given me that wondrous sense of childhood that I had, when you first ever listened to that first, you put that record player or that CD or that MP3, whichever generation you are on, and the moment that crackle and pop starts, or that tape whirs, or the CD whirs into view, or the MP3 just snaps instantly into your ears, that moment of giddiness and of joy, and of that moment where you think, I could do that. I want to do that. I want to be that drummer, that bass player. That's my problem. Is why I've never really been in many bands. I've been in a few bands, but I never really stuck. It's because I wanted to be the bass player. I wanted to be the singer. I want to be the guitarist. I want to be the drummer. I want to play the keyboards. I was never satisfied, and I got wayward. I'd put my oar in. I couldn't leave the lyricist alone. I couldn't leave the guitarist I wanted to be, and then I realised that I wasn't that person, and I found it difficult to pull away, and so I just then sort of tried to aim towards one instrument I loved, which was guitar, but all the bands that I was playing in didn't need guitarists because at that time it was the 80s and that was the era of the guitar hero and everyone had a guitar, but no one wanted to play bass. So I picked the bass up. Well, actually, that's not true. I'd always loved the bass from an early age because I was a John Entwistle fan of The Who and, of course, of Steve Harris from Iron Maiden and Chris Squire from Yes and, and Geddy Lee of Rush and of J.J. Burnell of The Damned, Foxton of The Jam. I could roll off hundreds of bass players, Jar Wobble of Peel, Glenn Matlock of The Pistols, sorry. So, I've always been fascinated by bass players. And so when I sort of moved to bass, it wasn't any different. Anyway, I've gone right off the story, but it's just a little bit of backstory about me. I say thank you very much. Keep listening. I can't wait to get to our 100th episode. In a few weeks' time, we have set aside a time to record. Benji and I, we've got an epic history-based one. A lot of people have loved the history-based episodes. I got a lot of feedback on that. This one's going to be around war, all based around Sabbaton music, the music of Sabbaton or Sabaton or whatever you want to call it, however you like to call them. It's going to be quite a long one, quite rambling. It might be 2 parts. I'm off in a few weeks' time to see, if you hear this episode now or later, I've just been, or I'm going to see Stephen Hackett at the Enmore Theatre with my very good friends, John, Parksy and Mark and Kevin and Steve, to see Stephen Hackett at the Enmore. It's been 3 years in the waiting. Fucking COVID. Great tickets, 4 rows in the front. He's doing the entirety of Selling England by the Pound and Seconds Out, songs from Seconds Out, the Genesis Live album. I'm sorry, there's going to be some crying on my part when they play I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, which he didn't play last time he was here. Yes, I think it might bring a tear. And I'm very proud of that fact, and I don't really care, personally. If it elicits that emotion in me, then it's all I can ask for. But I will be doing an episode on that. I know this hasn't been a metal episode, but you know me, you know what I listen to, you know what I love, and this is an important album musically, historically, in the history of packaging of product, in the history of the band and progressive rock, and just ballsy. Side 1 and side 2, ballsy. I love the balls of it. They're going to their record label and they're saying we're going to make this. Now they probably wouldn't have cared because it was the era of prog and prog was massive, and they would have gone, well, just do what you want to do, guys. More organ, more Hammond organ, more whittly diddly, more flute solos, more ludicrous, non-ending, non-scanning lyrical moments. More. Until you can't take any more, until you get to the, levels of ELP, and then you burst that bubble and punk appears and it all fades away. And then it all comes back again because people realise they fucking loved it. It never went away, really. Anyway, that's me rambling on. Please come back please do go over to my page. Please say happy birthday, happy 50th episode to me. And again, thanks for listening. It's been a great journey from episodes that I could barely get the mic to work, to episodes where it was so obtuse that I got like 3 listeners because it was about a topic that no one cared. My numbers are really speeding up, getting a lot around the world. Interesting places listen to me. And I love that fact. My little man in Boardman, USA, or man or woman, so I don't know, or gender neutral, whatever, is listening to me every week. I see that number and I get a little bit of warmth in my heart. Louisville, little warmth in my heart. Canberra, big numbers in Sydney, Mexico, of all places, India, UK. Yeah. Anyway, Thanks again, guys. That's my kiss to you. Keep rocking, keep listening, keep enjoying the shows, and I'll see you next time. And who knows what next will be, but thank you again. Bye, guys.
Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right. McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has a special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.